Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the biggest questions you can possibly ask. We're putting modern physics up against thousands of years of contemplative wisdom in a fascinating debate. So let's just get right to it. What is all of this, really? At the most fundamental level, are we just a bunch of atoms and particles, following a set of strict, unbreakable rules? Or could reality be something else entirely? That's the huge puzzle we're going to try and unpack today.
And to do that, we're going to look at this through two totally different worldviews, each one championed by a pretty brilliant thinker.
In one corner, you've got theoretical physicist Sean Carroll. His argument? That the basic laws of physics that govern our day-to-day lives, well, we've pretty much got those figured out. And in the other corner, you have Buddhist scholar Alan Wallace. He argues that science has this giant blind spot, that it's totally overlooked the most important part of the equation, the mind itself.
Okay, so let's start with Sean Carroll's perspective. Let's dig into his case for a reality that, at its core, we actually understand quite well.
So Carroll has this great way of explaining it. He says reality kind of exists in different layers, but they're all compatible with each other. Think about your phone, right? At the deepest, most fundamental level, it's just a bunch of electrons and quarks doing their thing. But then you have this middle layer of circuits and code. And then, at the top layer, the one you actually interact with, there's the user interface, the app you're using. You don't need to understand the quarks to use the app, but these layers all work together perfectly. And Carroll says, hey, that's basically how the universe works.
And that idea brings us to what he calls the core theory. Now, this is basically the established, incredibly successful theory of particles and forces. Electrons, photons, gravity, the whole shebang that makes up you, me, and this room. And here is his really provocative claim. For everything that happens in our everyday lives, this theory is complete.
Now hold on, Carroll's not saying scientists can just pack up and go home. He's not saying we know everything about the universe. Stuff like dark matter is still a huge, mind-bending mystery. His point is actually much more specific, and it's this. We are not going to discover some new particle or new force that changes how our biology works. And why is he so confident? Well, because if that kind of stuff existed, our super powerful particle colliders, like the Large Hadron Collider, they would have seen it by now.
And if you follow that logic, it leads to a pretty startling and, for a lot of people, a really unsettling conclusion. If we are made of particles that we totally understand, and we know exactly what those particles do when our bodies stop functioning, well, then there's just no physical mechanism we know of that could allow the information that makes you, your personality, your memories, to continue on.
So, if this one life is really all we get, what does that mean for us? Carroll really puts it into perspective with a single number. 3 billion. That's it. That's roughly the number of heartbeats an average person gets in their entire lifetime.
But for Carroll, that's not a sad thought at all. In fact, he finds it incredibly empowering. It's a challenge. It's liberating. Knowing you have a finite number of heartbeats, that's what focuses the mind. It tells you that this isn't some dress rehearsal. This is it. So you'd better make every single one of those moments count.
But what if that whole physicalist worldview is built on a foundation that's not as solid as it seems? Let's switch gears and turn to Alan Wallace, because he offers a completely different picture, and he does it by questioning the very assumptions physics is built on.
Wallace comes at this from a completely different angle. He loves this quote from the poet Muriel Rukeyser. The idea is that the stories we tell ourselves, the frameworks we use to understand the world, are just as real, just as fundamental, as the atoms themselves. Physics, from this point of view, is an incredibly powerful story. But it's not the only story.
See, Wallace argues that the physicist worldview is standing on a few core beliefs that we treat like scientific facts, but are actually, when you look closely, just unproven assumptions. He really wants us to ask the hard questions. Is the future really set in stone? Does a real world truly exist out there, totally separate from us, the ones observing it? And is everything that exists really, truly just physical stuff? Wallace says these aren't proven truths. They are articles of faith for the religion of physicalism.
To get his point across, he brings up that classic old parable of the blind men and the elephant. You know the one. Each man touches a different part of the animal. One feels the trunk and says, "It's a snake." Another feels the leg and says, "No, it's a tree." They're all describing their piece of it accurately, but they are all completely wrong about the whole elephant. Wallace's point? Maybe science is doing the exact same thing, describing one part of reality with incredible accuracy, while mistakenly thinking it's describing the whole thing.
And that really brings us to Wallace's central critique. He says that science has created these unbelievable tools and methods for observing the entire universe, everything out there, but has completely failed to develop any tools to observe the one thing that's doing all the observing, the mind, our own consciousness. There is no microscope, no telescope, no machine that can directly see or measure a thought or a feeling.
So this is where the whole debate really comes to a head. It all boils down to the most personal and profound mystery there is. What are we? What is consciousness?
And this is the great divide. For the physicist, consciousness is just a fancy word for what the brain does. It's an emergent property of a very complex biological machine, and when that machine breaks, when the brain dies, consciousness just stops. But for the scholar, maybe consciousness is something much more. Maybe it's a fundamental aspect of reality itself, something our science just hasn't figured out how to see yet. And if that's true, it might not need a brain to exist at all.
And Wallace points out that this isn't just some fringe spiritual idea. He actually quotes another physicist, André Linde, who asks this exact question. What if consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, just like space and time are? If that's even a possibility, then any theory that leaves it out, like Carroll's core theory, would be by its very definition incomplete.
So we end up right back where we started, faced with a choice. A choice between two powerful stories about what reality is. Do you spend your 3 billion heartbeats exploring the physicist universe of atoms, finding meaning in this one precious, finite life? Or do you spend them exploring the scholar's universe of stories and awareness, looking inward and asking if we've missed the biggest secret of all? Or maybe you explore both. The journey is yours.